So I want to talk about jetting today. This bike, unfortunately, when it came in, its original exhaust was not savable or reusable. So the customer went with the aftermarket exhaust, which is, it fits the bike, but it's obviously, really poorly designed, and will require this bike to be jetted. It runs like a garbage truck right now. You can't even ride it hardly. I mean, it doesn't go off the line and hits like 55 grand, and it just falls on its face. So what we're gonna do is, instead of just endlessly jetting this thing, which I hate doing, we're actually going to work on improving the exhaust. Now, the exhaust principle that you need to know if you're working on a motorcycle, or really anything, I mean, cars don't matter so much, but motorcycles are really touchy about this. It's called the helmholtz principle. And basically what the helmholtz principle states is that when you create a high pressure area, like an exhaust, it would create, if a cylinder would fire, it would create a high pressure area inside the cylinder, and then as it comes out the exhaust, it creates a slight vacuum in there. So as the next cylinder fires, there's actually a vacuum for it to fire into, and the engine runs much better. But what's happening with this exhaust system, as you can see how black and sooty it is in there, it's not creating that high and low pressure. It's really just kind of like, it's firing, and it's just like moving the exhaust out little by little. And the exhaust is actually coming out the tip cool, which is a big sign that the exhaust isn't working right. The exhaust should really fire hot out the tip when the engine's running, then you know you're good. Now, these mufflers are awful. The first baffle in it is like in here, and the holes are massive. So you have this whole huge zone here, and you have this whole huge area here that the exhaust is firing into, where it's actually cooling down, and when the exhaust cools, it creates kind of a back pressure, which hurts the engine a lot, which I think is what's going on with this. So what we're going to do to improve the Helmholtz principle and make it actually work in this bike, make it have its high and low pressure zones and create vacuum like it should, is we're going to put in what Harley guys would know as a lollipop. There's a couple I made. Got one for each side. I drilled a hole down here. We're going to put this in with a magnet. You can see it's got some room around it, and it has a small hole in the middle. Now, if this is too much, usually the bike will run really good when I first put these in, and if it's too big, what will happen is when it gets up to the higher RPMs, it'll kind of struggle. But it's not a big deal, because once I weld this in, all I have to do is take the muffler back off, and I can bend it to adjust it, where I need, or I can turn it just by hitting it with a hammer and make it work right. So we're going to weld those in, and hopefully, in my experience with doing this, we shouldn't have to jet the car. We might have to do it a little bit. I've already went up one size on the main jets because this exhaust is much larger than the stock one, but unfortunately the stock one was completely rotten out. Perfect. Okay, so you can just see them down in there. They're looking good. So let's get back together and start it. There it is. Just got back from a ride. Runs pretty damn good. So, has a tiny flat spot between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM, but honestly, if you crack the throttle open, you don't even feel it. So it went from being unrideable and stalling constantly to a pretty rideable bike. I hit the red line on it. I did about 100 miles an hour. Good to go. All the stock jets back in it. So she's happy now. Hopefully we'll check the plugs in about 80 miles and see how they look, but just judging by how it feels, I'm thinking it's going to be fine. So there you go. Lollipops in action.